we want to kick this off with your unpopular opinion.
Okay. So I know this is going to alarm some of you, but I actually think that peanut butter and jelly isn't a real meal. And I don't think it constitutes like an actual sandwich. You sound
words
upset.
Over here.
Am I stressing
I'm
you?
not upset. I'm just disappointed in you. It's
you were expecting more.
I spent $9 on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich this week in Vegas.
She did.
Out of the sandwich shop I went to that had like 40 sandwiches on the menu, I ordered a peanut butter and jelly.
Listen, I grew up in an immigrant household where when you went to lunch for school, you brought like a hot lunch. It didn't matter how hard your parents worked. You weren't like eating peanut butter and jelly for lunch. It's crazy.
You know what's funny? I actually feel like, okay, maybe I'm going to side with you on this, because I don't think I've ever been a peanut butter and jelly girly. Like, it's never been like my go-to, but you're a connoisseur.
Well, I hated pizza growing up. I've never liked pizza as a child, as an adult. So when we used to go to birthday parties, it was like for kids, the cheapest way to feed a party of elementary school kids is like pizza.
Yeah, of course.
So I would always bring my own little like sack lunch, little brown bag lunch to birthday parties with me with the peanut butter and jelly in it because I didn't want to eat pizza.
Am I triggering your childhood right now? I didn't.
You're making me want a peanut butter and jelly because I am passionate about them. I love them so much, and I'm very specific. I like the peanut butter to jelly ratio matters. The type of jelly, the type of peanut butter, the type of bread. Like there's so many variables to make the perfect PB&J.
Listen to me. It's not a meal. I don't care. I don't care how many different kinds of peanut butter. I don't care if it's chunky or creamy. I do not care. It's not a meal. I didn't try my first peanut butter and jelly sandwich until I was 25 years old. And even then I was like,
that is insane.
Fine. This is fine. You know, this is okay.
Have you ever had a toasted peanut butter and jelly? That's a hot meal. That's a hot meal.
In your defense, it is. That's a very good point.
Toast it with butter on it, and then the peanut butter gets kind of melty, and I might have that for dinner.
Here we go.
I don't know. I feel like now maybe you can open like a food truck, a peanut butter and jelly food truck, and just go from place to place with all different types.
I think is that like a great idea here in LA. I think so, but I think there might be like a sandwich truck with like very custom, I think that actually might exist.
Do you want to know what I did to my PB&J though in Vegas? So there's this sandwich shop in Vegas called Schwartzbach, and it's kind of like a stoner sandwich shop. So all the like the size of the sandwiches are like you can get a nug or like everything's a weed reference. So the PB&J is called the Sticky Icky. Like every sandwich and like reference on there is all like a pot reference. Yeah. So, but they have like a bunch of ingredients like hot Cheetos that you can put in your, like, you know what I mean? It's like a stoner designed menu, but I added prosciutto to my PB&J.
Oh my God. I don't know how I feel about that.
Okay.
I've gone to the sandwich shop a couple times and I do that. And someone, like the first time I ordered it, the person at the front was like horrified. And then when I ordered it this time, the girl was like, never heard that. Actually sounds pretty good. And I was like, try it later. On it, guys, I'm Italian, so I will add prosciutto to anything.
I'm on your side on this one. So
it was so good.
I'm mortified right now, and I feel like you're really
now you have salty and sweet.
If it doesn't have like a hot meat in it, then you made it a sandwich. It wasn't a sandwich until you added the meat. Like
I just wanted salty. I'm Italian. I'll put prosciutto on anything like that. I can. If prosciutto is an option on the menu, I'm adding it to whatever I'm getting, even if it doesn't go like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Okay. So here's what I hope. Anyone who listens to this podcast, please just try it and comment under the box for wherever this podcast lives.
Yeah, we got to know. We need to know. Absolutely.
I need feedback.
I'm telling you guys.
Yeah. We need to know.
I need
10
feedback.
out of 10.
I am.
Okay, so you mentioned
truly I'm amazed. I'm amazed.
Have that effect on people.
She does. I love it. Wait, so okay, you mentioned this, which I think is one of the most wonderful things about you, and we love learning about cultures here. So you are the daughter of immigrants. Can we get into that a little bit and learn about your background?
Yeah. Yeah, so my mom and dad come from a very tiny Eastern European country called Macedonia. When I tell people that I'm Macedonian, they ask me if I'm Mesopotamian. They ask me if I'm macadamian, like the nut. They aren't quite they aren't quite sure that it actually exists. I promise you, it's a real country, and they have a real language and everything. So my parents came here in the early 80s, and they had absolutely nothing. They lived in the basement apartment of a very good family friend of ours who helped them sort of get their bearings when they came here. And, they really did everything and gave everything for my sister and myself to have the opportunity to have a life here that they couldn't necessarily have there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to get into this a little bit because we love learning, obviously, about languages and cultures. It's Eastern Slavic, correct? Is that the language that you speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's Macedonian. It's the Cyrillic alphabet.
Okay. Can you say something in Slavic?
Sure. I mean, možem da zborim makedonski, but you're not going to have any idea what I'm saying anyway. So
what did you say?
That's like one of the.
You said, "Fuck you."
That's one of my favorite parts about such an obscure language. My sister and I used to be able to go anywhere and just trash talk anything, and so few people knew what we were saying.
That is the dream. That is the absolute dream. If I had that ability,
it is. It brings such joy to know that very few people are going to have any clue that you're actually talking about them. So,
has it ever happened though, where you guys were and someone randomly that you would never have expected, spoke back to you in your language, and you were like, shit, we had no idea that.
That hasn't happened, but it's happened to me actually when people think that I don't understand or speak Spanish, because I actually have a pretty extensive background in Spanish language. So they've actually spoken about me in front of me, and I've responded back in Spanish, and they're like, what the fuck?
They're like, this blonde girl is habla español.
Where did this girl come from? Yes, they're very, very confused. That's happened to me a number of times, the opposite way.
Oh my God. So you speak 3 languages?
Yeah, I used to be very, very good at Spanish. I studied it from 6th grade all the way through college, and I almost had enough to do a second major. But I was poor, and I couldn't go study abroad anywhere. I had to work. So I had a very extensive background, but never really got to get immersed in it. That being said, I can still do a pretty mean anesthesia assessment in Spanish, which I always apologize up front about how it's mediocre, but we can get through. So
yeah. What was it like growing up in an immigrant household for you? What was it like?
One of my very best girlfriends is the child of Cuban immigrants, and she put it best. The number one rule for being the child of immigrants is you learn how to lie.
Oh, wow.
You learn how to hide anything. And it's actually not very true for me. I was a very good kid. I was a big dork and a big nerd. But my parents didn't know what college entails. My parents had no idea what happens when people go away to college. They didn't realize that parties are a thing. They didn't realize the extent of what happens. So those are the things you kind of keep to yourself when you are around the parents. Better that they don't know. Lots of slang, lots of terminology. Those things are just off the table. You're not teaching them any of that stuff. You're teaching them the bare minimum to get through their conversations, but some things are better left unspoken. So, it was, to me, growing up before we moved, when I was a little bit older, I grew up in a neighborhood that had such diversity and such culture and a part of the tri-state area that I thought it was normal that every single kid in my class spoke 2 languages. I mean, that's just how it was. And I'm very grateful for that experience and that immersion, because it just made it feel like second nature that you're around a whole different melting pot of people. That being said, the work ethic that comes from people who left everything behind to start new is something that really resonates extensively. And, you know, I tell people every day, I've always had a love of learning and a curiosity of learning, and that's always been innate. But I've seen, you know, my parents, my dad, who has been a butcher and a meat cutter and who worked at Costco for, you know, almost 30 years of his life and worked his way up. And my mom, who, you know, took whatever job she could after leaving. She was brilliant in her home country. She was the most phenomenal writer and speaker. She had dreams of becoming a journalist, and she left it all behind to come here so that she could start a life for, you know, my sister and myself someday. And knowing that and understanding how much sacrifice they made and how much they left behind to give me the opportunity that I have today, that instilled a very deep passion for, to me, education is not a right, it's a privilege. Mm-hmm. It's a privilege to be able to go to school. It's a privilege to be able to get a graduate education. It's a privilege to be able to learn instead of having to just do whatever you need to do to get by. And I try to keep that mindset every day, even, you know, when I was in the thick of grad school and it was brutal and you're trudging along and it feels like the time just doesn't pass and the days are so long. That was always in the back of my mind, that I'm given an opportunity that many people aren't provided.
Oh my God, yeah. You actually, so you're obviously a very profound writer, and we were digging around on your website, and I found a blog that you did, and you said this: I felt obligated to honor the immense sacrifices of those who came before me. And I don't know, there was just something really, really deep, and I would love for you to dig into that a little bit, because I do think that, you know, we take things for granted, right? And there are moments that I've had similar to yours where, like, I struggled through school academically. But I'm really curious because I feel like this drive that you have is so deeply rooted in you. Can you expand on that a little bit?
It is, you know, and it's in large part, I think, when you know where people came from, and it's not like my parents left behind some lavish life. They lived on tobacco farms in a tiny village in a remote country. And, you know, my dad tells me a story about when he first came to the United States. He literally had $70 in his pocket. And the taxi driver from JFK Airport in New York charged him exactly $70 to get to where he was going. Wow. And he was left with absolutely nothing. So my dad ended up finding a job at a restaurant, and he worked on New Year's Eve as a waiter. And he had extensive restaurant training back in Macedonia, so he did very well. He did not know the language at all. I learned English through Sesame Street. Like, we all learned together. He did not know the language at all. And he served on this wild, huge, lavish New Year's Eve party. And he made $300 American that night. And he said, "This is the American dream. You can come here in one day and create that for yourself." And to this day, he still tells that story as sort of that trigger for saying, even when times are tough and even when things were difficult, I was given an opportunity to literally go from nothing to that much at one point in time.
It's like goosebumps. That's like such a powerful story.
Yeah. I mean,
it's you know, it's funny to me because it just feels normal. It feels like the only thing I've ever known. And I think that's why, you know, a large part of my own imposter syndrome, even sitting here talking to you guys right now and having an audience and having an outlet and having people who, you know, reach out to me. So much of that stems from the fact that I'm like, who am I? You know, how is this possible? How did I get to this place? It's a very surreal thing when you grow up with the mindset of you need to work for every single thing that you've ever had. And then when you get to a certain place, you wonder if it's all going to be taken away. And I think anyone who grew up from a modest or meager beginning would probably agree that you just sit there. Listen, if I'm not working 2 jobs minimum at any point in time, I feel like something is wrong. I feel like I'm not doing something right. And I understand that logically, that doesn't make sense. But if you came from a certain background, that's going to be ingrained in you. So just to have the opportunity to sit here and talk to you guys, it's crazy.
You know what's interesting though is you mentioned how your mom back at home was such an amazing like author, speaker, wanted to go into journalism, and then left that behind to come here for your sister and yourself to give you guys opportunities. And now here you are, this amazing author with this platform who's being able to speak to others. And it's, I don't know, that's just a really cool story. And I don't know, that's amazing to me that what she left behind to give you guys, that you're giving now the world. Like that's so awesome.
And you know, it's one of those things where it came full circle, and it definitely manifested through me without question. It so came to life through me. And I tell people all the time, and I try to not freak them out. I'm like, well, my mom is like a touch of psychic. My mom knew a lot. My mom was very highly connected to whatever there is.
I'm obsessed with this so much that you said that, because I'm fascinated by people with that, because there are people that I'm really drawn to that kind of energy and those kinds of people.
Right.
I love that.
Right. So, I mean, I will tell you, I've gotten some of that from her, and for many, many years, I suppressed it and I ignored it and I tried to shut it out. But she was so highly connected that years ago, before I was even an English major, before I became a nurse, years ago, like when I was a teenager, she told me, because she just knew that I was going to be a writer someday and I was going to be an author. Like, she just knew. There was no question. That was nowhere on my radar. That was nowhere on my trajectory. I had no idea that any of this would happen at any point in my life. Mm-hmm. And yet, when it did happen, and when my first book, which again, I published it thinking it was a bucket list item. I literally said, by my 30th birthday, I want to write a book. And if the only people who buy it are my parents, cool. When that book ended up selling far more than I could have ever dreamed, my mom just looked at me knowingly. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't shocked. She was proud, but she always knew. So, having that connection with somebody and having the background that I come from, that sort of stuff is what makes these moments feel very serendipitous. And it makes these conversations feel like, listen, I know this is a deep conversation to be having after we just talked about the merits of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But
that's what we get here on the Selfie Show.
that's what I love.
Yep.
That's what I love, to be able to do, go from one place to another and have it all sort of connect again.
This may sound like a really maybe trivial question, but if you could go back, is there anything about your upbringing that you would have changed?
That's a difficult question. I'm very proud of who I am today, and I'm very proud of the person that I've become. I think that it's not necessarily my upbringing that made me such a chronic people pleaser for so many years, but I think that that's in large part being a woman, being a member of this society, being an empath, being a sort of feeling and giving, compassionate human being. I'm not sure that is specifically tied to my childhood, but, presumably it's definitely connected. But for the most part, I'm not someone, I've gone through some shit in life, but I've never been somebody who harbors any regret or resentment. And I truly mean that. I don't feel well. I don't feel right when I keep that anger or resentment or aggression within me. I don't operate at that level. I feel best when I can forgive and move on, or overcome and move on, or turn it into something that is going to be positive for other people. And I don't know if that's something that maybe that is something that stems from growing up how I grew up. But for the most part, you know, if my biggest issue was that my parents loved me too much, I'm pretty grateful for that.
That's a good problem to have.
So you come here and like your dad said, like, here I am, opportunity. What made you decide nursing?
You know, I actually was working at MTV in their legal department.
Interesting.
Love this for you.
I worked for MTV Networks in their legal department, and it was like a very corporate role, but it was obviously in the entertainment industry, the media industry, which is a far cry from what it's like to be in the hospital. Before that point in time, when I first went to college, I thought that I wanted to go to medical school. My mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was 18. And that experience was so traumatizing to somebody who, at that point, I sort of knew that I was becoming her caretaker in many ways because I knew the language better than my father did. I didn't know anything about healthcare, but I was somehow the go-to person. And that news led me to say, I will never set foot in a hospital again. I will never, ever enter the world of healthcare. If I'm not going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer. So I transferred from colleges to be closer to home. I left my scholarship at a different university behind, and I came to be closer to home so that I can either for treatments and help with stuff around, you know, locally. And that's when I ended up taking all of my little sciences that I had already started, and I ended up getting an English degree. So I studied English. I ended up interning in the city and then taking this job, which was a phenomenal opportunity at the time. And I'm very thankful for it because the people that I met through that experience, excuse me, are still some of the most instrumental human beings in my life and some of my closest friends. Like truly, they are people who have impacted my life since years and years ago. And yet I sat on a train that was stalled for 45 minutes in the heat of the summer, waiting and waiting and waiting, doing the daily grind, doing the daily commute. And it literally hit me. I said, what do I want in a career? At this point, it was the recession. The economy was like going to crap. I was very fortunate to have a job with an income and health insurance and all of that stuff at the time because the economy was absolutely tanking. And I wrote down 3 things that I wanted for myself in a career. And I said, I want to give, to learn, and to grow. And as I sat on the train, I still had that piece of paper somewhere in a box. I said, how come I never thought about nursing? How come I didn't even realize that nursing was an option? And maybe that's because I wasn't exposed to it. Maybe that's because for my parents, in their country, nurses are very different than they are here, at least at the time. You know, there was a different perception on what they did. There was a different role. They didn't quite have the level of respect that they have in this country. So I decided I'm going to look into nursing school. And I applied to nursing programs while I was working in my corporate career. And I ended up walking away from it and going back to being a waitress and bartender while I went to school full time. And then I took a job as a patient care technician at the hospital. So I worked 2 jobs while I was in school full time, putting myself through nursing school. And truly the reality is watching my mom go through her treatment and the nurses that took care of her and understanding that physicians have a phenomenal role in what they do, but the person truly caring for the patient from minute to minute is the nurse. That's what put me in that place. That's what shifted me into that perspective.
That's amazing. What, in terms of, you know, your journey, your nursing journey, what's like the highlight of, you know, where you started? And then I'm really curious about your journey into DNP, because that's a lot. It's a very, you know, DNP, it's a lot. So I'm curious, you know,
it is a lot.
Yeah. How did you start as a nurse, and then maybe the decision to go that route? What was that decision like?
Sure. Yeah. So as a new graduate, I worked on a high acuity heart failure and heart transplant unit. And that was for the first like 13 months of my career. And this was at a level 1 trauma center where patients in a step down unit, in other hospitals would have been intensive care unit patients. I mean, they were critical patients. You know, they're walking around on milrinone drips with ejection fractions of 10, 15%. They're either awaiting transplant or had a transplant. It was phenomenal experience because my preceptors were such amazing human beings on that unit, and because the amount of knowledge that I was filled with in that year on that floor, and the amount of just absolute mental preparation, figuring out how to prioritize, figure out how to manage the task, that was crucial for my start. But during nursing school, I witnessed an open chest code at the bedside during a clinical day, and the team got the patient back. And I remember thinking to myself, while I was in clinical, I'm going to work in that unit one day. I want to do what they did one day. That's the kind of nursing that I want to do. And I applied to that job in the CTICU, and they told me I didn't have enough experience, but I didn't care. And I got the interview anyway. And I got through the interview, and then I got the job, and then I had a 6-week orientation as a new ICU nurse.
That's it. Ooh.
6 weeks. So I had 6 weeks as a new grad, and then I had 6 weeks as a new ICU nurse in the sickest unit in the hospital. And it was overwhelming, but it was exciting, and it was adrenaline pumping, but terrifying. And ultimately, that was a huge motivator in why I wrote my first book, because you don't realize how helpless and clueless you feel until you are literally in these life or death circumstances, and you're looking to others to be there for you and to help you through. So I ended up on that unit. I was actually a CTICU nurse for 5 years before returning to my doctorate in nurse anesthesia, which, as far as nursing years goes, it's like dog years. Like, that's a pretty long time before going back to school. And during my time in the ICU, I actually had gotten into doctoral programs prior to when I actually left. And I got into one of the, a very prestigious program. I was accepted into it probably about 2 years into my career as an ICU nurse. And then I got a call while I was at work that the PET scan on my mom showed a mass on her lung. And I remember standing in an empty patient room while my 3 best friends from the unit let me have a full-blown panic attack. And I had 2 critical patients that I was taking care of. Meanwhile, I was like, I cannot do this again. I don't know how I'm going to do this again. I did it again, because that's just what you do. And I had at the time probably one of the most incredible human beings on the planet, who was my head nurse, and she covered my assignment for me. She made arrangements. She told me to get a ride home and leave, and do not turn around and come back. I mean, we
love those charge nurses, baby. Yeah, thank you.
Those are the people you will forever remember as instrumental during those moments. So she ended up requiring a lobectomy, and at the time we weren't sure what the verdict was going to be, whether it was going to be some sort of metastatic disease or something benign. And she made it very clear that she did not want to endure chemo again after having gone through it before. So I knew that this was going to be a crucial determination. And I'm sitting in one of the top hospitals in New York City after her surgery, and she's in pain, and she's been writhing the entire day. And, finally I end up convincing someone to go call a pain management consult. And I spoke to an amazing nurse anesthetist, because they have a lot of CRNAs there, who was very kind and very helpful and very clinically capable. And I ended up staying overnight that night. And I took out a piece of paper, because it's what I do. And I told myself by my 30th birthday, my goal was to write a book. And I had absolutely no idea how to write a book. I had no idea what I was going to write about. I don't know how to write a manuscript. I don't have a publisher. I don't have an editor. It didn't matter. my goal was by my 30th birthday, I was going to write a book, because what was happening in front of me was a vast reminder that life is so fucking short.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Graduate school will always be there. The traditional path will always be there. The easy path will always be there. The commonly taken road is always going to be there. It's those other moments where you're like, I don't know why I feel this nudge from the universe, but I have to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's those moments that you have to follow. So I turned down my spot in that program, and I had people tell me that I'm crazy. I would be set for life. I could finish school and be done and, you know, have my nice living. And I did not care, because that did not matter. I knew that I couldn't leave my family at that time. And I knew that I was feeling called and compelled to do something else. So I went with my gut. And while I was in the unit, I wrote my first book, Oh Shit, I Almost Killed You, in 3 months.
I literally love the name, by the way. Great name.
Thank
Great
you.
Name.
Thank you. I wrote it in 3 months. I don't remember writing it. I just know that I went to Starbucks on my days off and I wrote. And it's a weird out of body experience when I write. People often ask me what my writing process is and how I structure it. And I'm like, I don't.
That's literally what I was going to ask you. What's your process?
It comes when it comes out. It is prolific, and when it's a patch of just nothing, there's not much. But I know when I'm forcing it versus when it's coming from a place that I can't control. And I will often go back and read my own work, and I don't know who wrote it, which is very common. So I ended up writing my book while I was in the unit, and I ended up staying and getting what I thought was really phenomenal ICU experience in addition. And I ended up publishing my book, and then I was able to, down the road, by the way, that pathology came back, and it happened to be a benign tumor.
Okay.
So I continued somehow, not knowing how to be an influencer, because that word still just makes me like cringe. But
I know, we all get
cringy
with that.
I know. Not knowing how to self-promote, because, you know, we, especially as women, are supposed to be very humble.
We're all of
course.
It's like the weirdest.
Of course. You can't actually like be proud or brag about your achievements.
Yeah. Of course.
How dare us?
Of course. Right. So, you know, navigating that, trying to figure out how I'm supposed to market this book, and then realizing that, like, holy shit, it's actually doing really well, and I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. Like, I'm running out of inventory. I'm my own manager. I'm my own editor, my own copywriter. I'm all of it. So, long story short, I ended up reapplying to a different program where I was accepted for anesthesia, and I was able to have an income come in because of my book. So it was much more comfortable for me to take a full-time graduate role, knowing at least that I would have something coming in. Because the thing that people don't always realize about a doctorate in nurse anesthesia is you truly can't work. Some people will attempt to work per diem here and there, or little bits at a time during breaks, but the workload is astronomical. And I think people hear the word nurse and nurse anesthesia, and they think it's going to be akin to nursing school. But truly, it is such a different level and so much more challenging and so much more labor intensive than nursing school was. So that's how I entered my role in a doctorate program, which, I mean, it's wild enough to have to go back to feeling like a total beginner and a total novice. And it's hard enough to be completely brand new at a skill set every single day. You're learning new skills from new people. You're in a different facility. I changed hospitals every 8 weeks. So every 8 weeks, I would have to impress a whole new staff, get to know a new facility, get to know new machines. Truly, that alone was hard. Exactly. Oh. That's hard enough. And then, you know, then we have a global pandemic in the middle of it.
Wow.
So,
fun. Yeah. Funsies.
You know, it right. I mean, right. Like, let's pour it all on. Let's throw it all out there. So, you know, graduate school was, I don't want to say it's one of the biggest challenges. It was extremely difficult What it tested more was my relationships outside of school than it did my ability to perform in school. And that is what I will tell people before they pursue that world.
Mm-hmm.
You need to set expectations that no one's going to understand until you're in it. And you're not going to understand just how isolating it can be until you're the one enduring it. So when it's all said and done, I'm forever thankful for having gone through the experience.
Yeah.
But the life experience and the life side of things, the things that have happened to me in the last year, 2 years, whatever of my existence, those are the real tests of your humanity, of your strength, of your resilience, of what you're capable of. School in a vacuum, extremely difficult but doable. School amid real life and real times and balancing everything and navigating things, that's what makes it difficult.
That's the hardest part. Yep. Actually, we had on Everett, who's the paramurse, and he's, currently finished, or he's in the process of finishing. And he said almost the exact same thing. Was the hardest part is, how it affects you personally. And for him, having his family close was a big piece of his decision as to what school he chose or the way he went.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big deal. And it's one of those things where people would say to me, because they don't, it's one thing when people outside of healthcare don't understand. It's a completely different thing when people who are even within healthcare, they also don't get it because they don't recognize just how taxing it can be. And people would say things to me like, well, can't you just pick a clinical site that's closer? It's like, no, I had no say in my clinical site. I was put wherever it was the best experience for that particular rotation. But I knew going into it that, like, when I tell you I spent thousands of dollars on Airbnbs and on car tolls, I mean thousands of dollars. And people need to realize before they jump into this type of a program, if you're giving up 36 months of a salary, you're giving up 36 months of a full-time job. You need to look at not only what investment you're making in terms of your student loans and everything else, but also the money that you're losing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that the money is the most important thing, but financial stress is a very, very real deal. And it's a very big impact. I can't, there is no way I would have survived or I would have stayed if it wasn't for my classmates. I had the most cohesive and incredible group of humans, and there was zero competition. There was zero bullshit. We all stood together, we banded together, we supported one another throughout the entire program. And having those people to commiserate with, to talk to unload with. I mean, to this day, one of my very best friends on the planet, actually, we work at the same hospital now, and she was my doctoral partner. We joke that during anesthesia school, we just traded off traumas. Like, it's not funny.
Yeah.
It's not funny, but it's kind of funny because if you don't laugh at it, it's going to be like, we literally just went back and forth with life's most insane, absurd things that happened. And somehow we got through it and somehow we survived. So, all of this is very funny to me. And the timing of it is funny because my mom passed away a week and a half after I started my career.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I started my job and she passed in September a week and a half later. And I believe with every part of my being that she didn't want me to enter this phase of my life worrying about her. And I believe she wanted to remind me that life is not about working all the time. Life is not about achieving the next major goal. Life is about enjoying this moment. Life is about the people that you love and the experience that you have, and not necessarily just diving deep into whatever it is that's next. And I will tell you, old me, pre-pandemic, pre-therapy, pre-life shit, pre-mom dying me, would have said, it's fine, I'll make it to work today. Because it's a great way to distract yourself from whatever's going on in your real life. And I'm certain that plenty of people that work in healthcare use their job as a distraction from whatever is going on. You know that you have a sense of control when you walk into that hospital. You know, if you go into that patient room or to that operating room or wherever you are, that you are in control to the best of your ability, even though you have no control outside. And I firmly believe that in her passing, she was teaching me that diving back into things isn't a way to live. It's not a way to process. It's not a way to honor your emotions. It's not a way to exist. So my own experience with grief, which has been a winding road, but for the most part, a very honest one, my experience has been much more authentic than I think it would have been otherwise.
It's crazy. Your mom sounds like one of the most wonderful women. I get emotional thinking about it because, like, I'm so close to my mom. But can you talk to us a little bit about your book? Coffee with your dead mom. I love this. I don't know. There's something about it that I think is just, it's lighthearted, but it's very deep.
Thank you.
What was this process like for you? And, let's get into that a little bit.
So coffee with my dead mother. And I sometimes I think to myself, my God, people must think I'm so morbid, but I'm not. And I think my mother loved her coffee, and for many, many years, she loved her cigarettes, and she would go outside in her garden and smoke her cigarette and enjoy her Turkish coffee.
Queen.
And that was her joy. That was, that made her happy. And for somebody who for so many years of her life and my life was so sick, at some point I stopped lecturing, because at some point I just said, you got to take whatever you want to enjoy. Those are the times when you have to say to yourself, I'm not a healthcare provider. I am this person's child. I am this person's family member. So when my mom passed, I knew the day before she passed, and it was unexpected, but I knew. I had a conversation with her in my head telepathically, and I went home from the rehab facility that she was in. She was getting ready to come home, and I wrote a goodbye letter to her because I knew it was the last time I would see her.
Wow.
And that was at 6:30 p.m. on a Sunday, and at 5:01 the next morning, my father called me and said that she had passed away. Wow. That connection, it's eternal, and it's not, there's no denying that connection. Mm-hmm. So a few weeks after she passed, I just felt every range of emotion. It was the most complex and complicated experience of my life, but it was also, like I said, the most honest experience of my existence. And I felt compelled to write. And I tell people I wrote the book in 10 days, but it was actually 4 days, because I worked 6 of those days. So I wrote it in 4 of the days over a 10-day period. And when I tell you I don't know where the book came from, I know that it was co-authored by her.
I was going to say, it was her mom. Yeah, I'm like, your mom is right there. Right? She was,
it just came out of me. And the coincidental moments that weren't a coincidence, the moments where I know she was presenting herself to me, I'm able to discuss this and not be in hysterics, because number one, I know that she's around all the time. And number two, I was raised with somebody who did not fear death and dying. She was somebody who had Deepak Chopra books around the house and Sylvia Browne books around the house. And she was an avid reader and learner of the English language. But she always knew that on the other side of whatever this life is, there's more, and there's something else. And this is not religious. This is not me talking to you about some sort of eternal whatever. This is purely just coexisting with a human who made it very normal to have conversations about death and about dying. And as someone who was a healthcare provider, and I have witnessed death in every form. In every form, I've seen loss. But until it's your own person, you can't put it into words. You can't recapitulate that experience. So I wrote that book in such a short time frame that I almost was like, is it like is this really finished? Did I really just do this? So I couldn't read it back to myself right away. I had to like let it sit for a few weeks. But then I was supposed to publish my second nursing book, You Won't Feel a Thing. And I had it with the publisher on September 1st, and I told them to stop publication. I said, I don't know if I ever want to publish that book. I don't know what's going on in my life right now. You know, my entire world was rocked. So I stopped publication. And someone said to me, it was someone very close to me, they said, are you sure you want to rush and publish this book? And I said, yeah, like, I'm my book. I'm my own boss. Like, there's no reason why I couldn't. And yes, I feel like I need to put it out there. So I sent it to my publisher, and it was published in February of this year. And I brought like 100 copies to work for the nurses and the staff at my hospital. And I just gave it to them for free. And I signed them all. And I said, you guys just keep taking them if you want them. And the feedback that I've gotten from people is that it's an honest account of grief and of loss, but it's not as heartbreakingly sad as you would think. It's actually got a very positive message and a very positive note. And it's a reminder to live the life that you want to live and to create the life that you want to create and to embrace the things around you, because the world will whisper and you're going to ignore it, and it's going to whisper and you're not going to listen. And then one day it's going to scream, it's going to slap you in the face, and you're finally going to listen. It's a reminder to listen to that nudge and that voice in your head, because it won't direct you wrong.
Who do you think needs to get their hands on this book? I have people in my head, but do you have an audience that you think really need this?
I do. I think, part of what I write about is the fact that grief it's not just loss of a physical person.
Mm-hmm.
You can grieve the loss of your identity. You can grieve the loss of a relationship. You can grieve the loss of a part of yourself. Grief is such a profound thing, and yet it's something that we don't talk about enough. It's something that we feel especially in the United States, we shy away from the conversation.
I was just going to ask if you thought that was cultural at all, because I feel being a critical care background, when I've had 3 of my grandparents all die at home on hospice, and I'm the one who initiated hospice for all 3 of them. And it was like talking to my family about even the idea of hospice was like shocking. Yep. And I guess I'm just very comfortable around death due to my profession. But I just started to realize, like, wow, in this country, we don't talk about death at all. And other countries treat death so differently. Yeah. It's very interesting.
We don't. And, I think that the most telling way that as a society that we're not good at having these conversations is that we're not good at having any of the difficult conversations. And death and grief are, without question, most people will have good intentions, but they will attempt to gloss over any sort of a deep dive and just give very, pre-constructed words of sympathy. It's the people who came to me and said to me, how are you really? Or how are you right now? Because for me to say okay is a bullshit answer. For me to say okay just implies I'd like to end this conversation. I'd like to exit. I'm not going to. Yeah. But if I said to you, I'm okay, it means that I knew you didn't want to know.
Yes.
And I think that
you're making it easy for them.
Well, people are asking as a courtesy almost, or because it's what they're supposed to do. But if you actually hit them with, I'm fucking terrible right now, that would catch them so off guard and be like, okay, well, that was not what I was expecting, because we don't ever go there. We always keep things up here.
Correct. So I instituted a number system with some of my closest people on a scale of 0 to 10. Right now I'm a 7. This morning I was a 0 when I was on the floor. This afternoon I might be a 5. Maybe tomorrow I'll be an 8. Because there's no way for you to go through any loss, whether it's life, whether it's a relationship, a person, an entity, an idea. There's no way for you to go through that and not experience a range. There's no way for you to say, I'm going to stay in this place. Mm-hmm. And I think, one of the most telling things about the way we treat loss in this country is the fact that bereavement time, so I ended up looking it up for my book because I was very curious. The average corporate amount of bereavement time is 1 day for an extended family member and 3 days for an immediate family member.
That's on par with my policies for the companies I've worked for.
Same. I ended up having a full week, which I'm so grateful for. But if you think about what does a week even do? By the time that week is over, it's not in the thick of things that you need people. It's when the dust settles that you do.
Yep. After.
It's when all the pomp and circumstance is done. It's when all the thank yous and the I'm sorry's and the it'll get better.
The flowers that they sent have wilted.
That's when you need people. That's when you need the support. So for me, opening up a conversation and saying, listen, I'm very comfortable discussing death, not because I think it's, an easy topic, but because it's something that's worth talking about. It's a conversation worth having. Because if you don't know the wishes of people in your life, it's going to be a very difficult situation down the road. If you don't know financial, let's talk about all of the hard things. That's what I'm trying to tell people. Let's talk about finances and sex and death and loss and all of the really uncomfortable things that nobody wants to say out loud. Let's get better at it.
Yes.
Because when you address it now, when you're face to face with it and you're head on, it's going to make it a lot easier down the road.
Yeah.
Well, we love bringing that stuff even to this show because it takes hearing it from different sources, I feel like, to start to make people be like, oh, actually, it's not so bad talking about that. Maybe I should have those conversations in my home.
It's so interesting. I was listening to a podcast of the host. Her mother actually committed suicide when she was, I believe, 18. And her thought on it in terms of, for people who want to help, she said, I'm someone that really feels like checking in on someone, 2 months after, 6 months after, a year, and also be okay having the conversations even later down the line. She's like, I hate when people really try to scoot around the conversation or don't, and obviously it's different for everyone. But yeah, I mean, and everyone handles grief so differently. What is something that you wish that everyone knew about grief?
I just wish they realized that it's a unique experience to everyone. There's no cookie cutter way to grieve. And because somebody appears to be laughing and doing well and having a great time doesn't mean they aren't grieving. I believe that grief will always exist with you. I think it's always going to be there. I think it will sit quietly in the background the longer that you go. I think it will make itself at home, but it's never going to overtake you as long as you don't allow it to. But I think it's unfair to judge somebody if they appear that they're doing well, or if you think that they're doing much better than they should be, or, if somebody's a widow or a widower and they move on. You don't know the complexity of their life experience. You don't know what they've been through, what they're going through, what anyone is going through. I wish there was less judgment in general, but especially in the conversations about this sort of stuff, because there's this expectation that there's a certain decorum or there's a certain time period. Or the flip side of that is, why are you still sad? It happened 6 months ago. It happened a year ago. It happened 10 years ago. Why don't you get over it? That's the flip side of it. Every grief experience is a unique experience. And, I am good most days, genuinely. But there are milestones that I have hit and have yet to hit that I know are going to be a rough time. Yeah. So I tell people, and I have friends who check in with me during those times, and they know whether I want to be around them or not. they give me the opportunity to share how I'm feeling, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and it's not all easy. And it's not, I have a very dear friend who experienced loss recently, and I could not physically go to a burial.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It was still too fresh.
Oh, yeah.
That is something that I know somebody will not judge me for, because it takes time, and it takes your own courage and your own capacity. And to be fair, I may never be able to go again. But right now, it wasn't something that I was capable of. So I think just allowing people to give them grace. That's all. People deal with things differently. And if they're truly struggling, don't just ask if they're okay. Do something for them. Send them a gift card for DoorDash so that they can get themselves dinner. Go over and watch their kids if they need a babysitter. Pick up something from the store and drop it off at their house. We as a society, and I think we do this for parents, we do this for, people who are looking for a hand but don't know how to ask. We're really good at saying, let me know if you need anything, but we don't ever actually
from
ask.
a distance. Yeah.
Of course. Of course. We don't actually take the initiative. And I think taking the initiative and just saying, listen, I sent you a bag of groceries and it may not be perfect, but that's what you're going to get for now. That speaks volumes. Yeah. Those things go such a long way.
I mean, I think there's definitely a difference between an offer and initiative.
Yes.
100%.
Because sometimes offers, even the most good intentioned offers, still feel a little empty without showing that initiative. I will tell you, I love that.
One of my very, very best friends, who she and I were nurses together in the ICU, and she's still to this day one of my closest friends. She sent food to my dad's house literally every day for the entire week. We had so much food, it was ridiculous. But she said, you guys need to eat. You're not going to eat. You're not going to think to eat. My other, one of my ride or die best friends, she went shopping for my mom's funeral dress with me. Talk about somebody who is really getting in there. And we had jokes. We both looked fabulous in our little black outfits going shopping, and we made jokes. But those people, the people who are willing to step in and do those things, it's not an easy conversation. But I will talk about it until I'm blue in the face with people, because this is the reality of life. You have to accept that it's going to exist in your life at some place in some way, and knowing how to take that. And, I've learned how to turn my pain into something prolific. And I think that's something that other people can hopefully learn from.
I was actually just quickly in that bloodline. Do you have, for anyone who's going through a loss right now, or maybe has experienced something and they're just in it, do you have any good tips or anything that you feel or any resources that might be good for them?
I have a list of resources in the back of my book for some online grief resources that people can reach out to, whether it's children who are grieving, adults who are grieving, whatever it is. But allow yourself to heal. Allow yourself to have grace. You don't treat yourself as though you would treat somebody that you love, because we are often so hard on ourselves. And I think what happens with these circumstances is we go through periods of guilt. We go through the what ifs. We go through the I could have, I should have, I would have. None of that matters anymore. None of that matters anymore. So whatever it is that you need to do, whether it's travel, whether it's write, whether it's connect with other people in your life, take that and move in that direction. And if you truly are struggling, depression, anxiety, they're very real. Mental health is a very real thing. Speak to a professional. And I mean that genuinely. There are so many apps. You can do it from your house. There are so many ways that you can connect with somebody for professional advice, because having these talks with the people around you may not always be as warm and fuzzy as you need them to be, because everybody discusses things differently. For me, writing things down has just been truly life-saving. It has been a saving grace for me. And if you don't have to be a great writer. You don't have to be a good writer. You just have to write. You just have to put your thoughts down somewhere in your iPhone note, on a piece of paper, on a Word document. Because someday you're going to want to look back at how you felt during this time and see how much you progressed. And I think that's crucial, especially when you're going through a time of such transition.
It's crazy. It's insane.
What about for people that, because I feel like I'm kind of seeing this right now. I have like my best friend lost her mom, who's kind of like a second mom to me, but now she's got a newborn on top of a toddler and just kind of like going through it. And I'm always just like, how can I be a better like friend or support person to her? Do you have any advice
I
like,
think that
people in my position or people like that of just like how to be that support?
I think the fact that you are even asking this question is proof that you're already an amazing friend to her. The fact that you care enough to inquire and look for ways to be better at it is already huge. I have some of my dear friends and one of my very best girlfriends who she's like a highly connected soul sister of mine. She will check in frequently, almost on a whim, almost just on a gut feeling. And she won't necessarily bring up my mom, but she will always know when I'm in it, when I'm in a moment. And she sent me a picture the other day that she saw a little Ukrainian woman on the street smoking her cigarette and having a coffee. And she was next to a rose garden. And she sent me a photo of her. And she said, she reminded me of your mom. It's those genuine things. It's those genuine moments where you allow someone to know that you're thinking of them and know what they're going through, but you don't necessarily have to broach the topic in a very head-on way. Because the other part that I've learned is that some people just can't discuss these matters and be functional. And unfortunately in life, you have to continue to be a parent. You have to continue to be a partner. You have to continue to be a good employee. So for many people, they can't talk about this the way I'm talking about it and still exist and function. So they have to compartmentalize it. They have to stick it in the back of their brain and not talk about it. And so my advice for you with regards to your friend is ask her, would you like to vent? Would you like to talk about it? Would you like me to distract you? Would you like me to bring up something that has nothing to do with it? What do you need? Because people will appreciate not being forced into the conversation if they don't have a space for it.
That's really good advice, because it is like hard. I mean, and then we don't ask people like what actually works best for you, and to assume sometimes does put them in a position that maybe they don't have the space for. I mean, I know in like my stepdad passed, and I'm so different than my sisters are about how we talk about things, and like even my mom, and like they're the type, like I'm a talker, like I want to talk about everything, and I can't have those conversations with them because they don't have the space for it. But I've never actually asked, and she's my best friend, I've never since kindergarten, but I've never actually had that direct conversation to be like, what do you need? So I actually genuinely appreciate that advice.
Yeah, it's something that I find works. And this is something that I find works too if I'm having conversations in general with someone who, it doesn't have to be lost. It could just be that they're in it. They're in the thick of whatever. Life is chaotic. I will ask them, do you want advice or do you want to vent?
Yeah.
Do you want me to help you, or do you just want to get it out? Because I can do whatever you want me to do, but I need to know what you need right now. And that helps direct me so that I'm not giving unsolicited opinions or advice if somebody is like, I just want to talk about it. And that's some valuable insight that I've been able to use in a lot of different circumstances with different situations with people.
It's so interesting because you're someone, I think, Sonja, that we've both been drawn to for a long time. And you said this in one of your blogs, the first step toward discovering what you want to do is recognizing who you want to be. I thought that was really interesting. And as we're closing out, I'm really curious, from your standpoint, because here you are, you're a CRNA, now doctorate of CRNA. You've written these books, you've overcome all these things. How did you really dig into that? And do you have any advice to someone who's maybe in this phase in their life?
What I've learned now, as I'm sitting here talking to you guys, after going through so many different versions of myself and discovering who I am at so many different junctures, my ultimate goal is to find joy. It's to find happiness. It's to find connection with other people. And if something doesn't bring me that, it doesn't belong in my life. And the person I was a decade ago would probably tell people, for instance, they're unhappy in their work, they're unhappy in their job. I would tell them, give it a shot. I'm not saying to get up and leave. But if you're miserable all the time, if you find no joy in what you're doing, it's okay to have a job that you're not passionate about as long as you have a source of joy.
Mm-hmm.
And I will always, no matter what I do professionally, writing and creating, whether I publish or not, will always bring me joy. It will always be a source of inspiration for me. It will always be something that gets me excited and passionate and makes me happy. As long as you have something that triggers joy in your life, you can figure out your path from there. And I think we are so bogged down by the reality of life, the everyday monotony, survival mode, paying bills, taking care of others, taking care of loved ones, that we put our joy on the back burner. And I genuinely believe that the key to a successful life, to a fulfilled life, to a fruitful life, is having a life of joy. I am not myself when I am not happy. And I know that truly.
Mm-hmm.
I've battled depression in the past. I battled situational depression, burnout. I am not my true self when I am not happy. So when I have that source of joy and that place of joy, I know it because everybody else around me knows it and they feel it.
Mm-hmm.
It will truly impact you. So it doesn't matter. The degrees don't matter. Letters after your name don't matter. It's all nice. But if you're only doing it because you can only see yourself at an endpoint and you can't get anything from the experience of existing in it, it's not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not worth it. You will never look around and smell the roses around you if you're just staring at the garden in the distance. You won't.
Yeah.
I would love just like a coffee table book of all your quotes.
Me too.
Because everything you say is so powerful.
It's crazy because
that's your next book.
Yeah.
Is literally you need just a coffee table book of all these
I'm writing
quotes.
I'm writing that down. I'm writing it down.
There we go.
And then in your foreword, you can thank the selfish.
I will.
But honestly, I love little things like that, but they're so profound.
Well, what's interesting and, is why a piece of you, there's very deep. It's funny because your Instagram, you're so good with your quotes. And in the moment, it's almost like when your feed pops up or when your post pops up in that moment, I'm like, how did she just know that I needed this today? Mm-hmm. And a lot of it's humor and a lot of it's just, but it's so, you are one of those people that I just think there's this level of deepness and sincerity, and you're such a prolific writer, which I'm very jealous of because I struggle with writing, but I love those deep messages and I love that. And I think there's this layer of you that honestly, I would love to bring you back and we didn't even touch on half the things we want to touch on, but I think today's message was just so powerful and you're just one of the most profound
It was
people.
so timely for me. I don't know, this has been a tough month and everything, because my stepdad's funeral was last month, and then I'm dealing with my friend and everything. So I'm just like, I don't know, I just needed this episode today. And I'm tired from traveling. Like I just flew in from LAX like 2 hours ago, but I'm like, this episode just like fed my soul a little bit.
So
like,
happy.
I needed it.
I'm truly so happy to hear that. And I really appreciate that because, you know, we exist in a space where little bites of entertainment and little snippets of something to distract our minds is the way that we exist, right? We scroll through videos and we scroll through photos and we look at memes, and there's a place for that. But to know that whatever it is that I'm doing, which just doesn't really have a niche, is impacting you guys in a positive way, that really makes me happy to continue doing so. Because
you're kind of people, girl.
I love it. Right back.
We're in that niche together. I think that's right, like, I don't know. We don't know what we're doing either, but I'm like, this is
I love
these
it.
are kind of conversations.
I love it.
Do you have anything good coming up that you want to shout out to the audience, or anything coming up soon?
Yeah, I mean, lots of exciting things that, like, because I'm my own boss, I don't have time for them. So I'm like, I'm not going to fire myself. But my website recently launched, nursesonjaknows.com, and I will be consistently blogging on there. I also am starting a webinar series that is hopefully going to be free for the continuing time frame. My first webinar is going to be this coming Friday. I know this will be this is going to air after, but I'm hoping to take topics that people have messaged me about, whether it's inside or outside of the hospital, and do like a 30-minute webinar with a Q&A so that people can come in and listen. And the questions that I keep getting repetitively, I can sort of answer in one space. So I was working on that presentation today for like hours because I don't know how to do it any other way. But it excites me. You know, I love teaching, and I think any way that I can get my hands on some ways to, whether it's as a consultant or as an educator or whatever, that's going to be coming down the road. And I'm really, really, really hoping that I can get a book tour, at least on the books, for like fall of this year, and do some in-person locations across the country.
Let us know if you're in Southern California.
Yeah, well,
for one.
I mean, I might have to plan it for there now, regardless. So
I mean, yes. There's lots of us.
We need to meet you in person.
I know, absolutely.
Copy of the book too.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my hope is that we can do another episode.
Oh, I would love
live
with you guys.
Love doing live episodes.
Ooh, that would be
know. Insane. Maybe I'll have to fly out. We'll see. I'll have my people call your people. I am my own.
We love our people.
I am my own.
We are the people.
And by that we mean we'll just
we'll DM each other. Love that for us.
So yeah, I'll DM you. Yeah.
Awesome. We love that for us.
I love you guys.
Where can every platform? Where can
we get your books?
You?
Oh, so yeah, I'm Nurse Sonja, Sonja, on Instagram. And my website is nursesonjaknows.com. You can get any of my books on Amazon currently, who is driving me insane. And I will be recording my audio books for both Coffee with My Dead Mother and You Won't Feel a Thing in the studio in Manhattan in the next couple months. So the audio books are going to be out as well.
Oh, that's exciting.
Currently, like I said, they're on Amazon sometimes. Sometimes Amazon's like, no, they're not. But I just sold out. I just sold out and got some more inventory back now. So
that's so exciting. I mean, you're a best-selling author, all of these things. I mean, you're just wonderful, Sonja. We are so thankful for your time.
I love you guys.
Highly recommend you guys.
It was so easy to talk to.
It.
Well, I'm on Amazon right now ordering the book.
Yes.
I know a few people I need this for.
And we will link them in the bio as well. We'll link all the resources in your website as well for everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Sonja.
Thank you guys. Really, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, don't get off yet. I'm just going to stop recording. But